The rich ladies at the park called my service dog disgusting. Then one needed him to save her life. I brought Noodle to the upscale dog park early Saturday morning, hoping to avoid crowds since he was still learning to ignore other dogs while working. His scruffy brown coat and mismatched ears didn't look like much compared to the designer breeds there, but he'd saved my life 14 times since my cardiac arrest 2 years ago. The heart condition left me with dangerous arrhythmias he could detect 40 minutes before they'd kill me. 3 women with perfectly groomed dogs were already there, and I saw them exchange looks when we walked in. The first woman, wearing tennis whites and diamonds, called out, "Excuse me, this is a private dog park for residents only." When I showed my key fob proving I lived in the complex, she frowned and said, "Well, your dog needs to be groomed before coming here. He looks like he has mange. It's inconsiderate to expose our dogs to whatever diseases yours is carrying." Her chow had a bow that probably cost more than my groceries. I explained Noodle was a service dog and had just been checked by the vet, but that made things worse. The second woman, clutching her designer Yorkie, laughed and said, "A service dog? That mutt? Real service dogs are labs or German shepherds, not whatever dumpster mix that is." She pointed at his vest and added, "You can buy those vests online for $20. I bet you're one of those people who just wants to bring their pet everywhere." The third woman joined in. "It's disgusting how people abuse the system. My friend has a real service dog and it's perfectly trained, not some flea-bitten rescue." When Noodle sat perfectly still beside me despite their dogs barking at him, the first woman got more aggressive. "You don't look disabled to me," she announced. "You walked in here just fine. What exactly is wrong with you that requires a fake service dog?" When I quietly mentioned my heart condition, she rolled her eyes. "Yeah, sure. You're practically a teenager, but you expect me to believe you have heart problems? You're probably just using it as an excuse to bring your untrained mutt places." The second woman pulled out her phone and started recording me. "I'm documenting this for the HOA. We have a woman here pretending her mongrel is a service dog. Probably doesn't even live here, disturbing our morning." She zoomed in on Noodle and narrated, "As you can see, this dog is clearly not a real service animal. It's mangy, probably aggressive, and the owner can't provide any real proof of disability." The third woman decided to test if Noodle was really trained by throwing a tennis ball right at his face. When he didn't react, staying focused on me, she got angrier. "See? A real dog would catch that. He's probably too stupid to be trained." She walked over and actually grabbed his vest, trying to pull it off. "Let me check if this is even official." Noodle stayed still, but I could see his stress as she manhandled him. When I asked her to stop touching my medical equipment, the first woman exploded. "Medical equipment? It's a dog. You're one of those crazy people who thinks their pet is a child. I'm calling the police about you impersonating a disabled person." She actually dialed 911 and reported that I was committing fraud and disturbing the peace with an aggressive dog, even though Noodle hadn't moved. While she was on the phone, the second woman tried to leash Noodle with her own lead, saying, "I'm taking this dog to animal control myself. He's clearly neglected and you're an unfit owner." When I blocked her, she shoved me hard, making me stumble. "Don't touch me. That's assault. Did everyone see that? She assaulted me." She started screaming that I was attacking her while trying to drag Noodle away from me. The third woman grabbed my medical alert bracelet and twisted my wrist to read it. "This is probably fake too. You can order these online." She actually tried to rip it off, saying, "Let's see if it's even real." The first woman was telling the 911 operator that I was now violent and they needed to hurry. "She's probably mentally ill. The dog might be trained to attack." The second woman had Noodle's leash and was pulling hard, trying to separate us completely. "Animal control will sort this out. This disgusting mutt belongs in a shelter." That's when Noodle went rigid, broke free from her grip, and started his alert behavior on the first woman, pawing insistently at her chest and barking his specific cardiac alert bark. He wouldn't stop, circling her and pushing her toward the bench, his entire body focused on her chest area. "Get your mongrel away from me," she screamed. But Noodle was in full medical alert mode, the same way he'd acted before my cardiac arrest. He kept pawing at her chest, whining urgently, trying to get her to sit down. "He's detecting a cardiac event," I said. "You're about to have a heart attack. He can smell the chemical changes. You need to sit down right now and call 911 back." Her face went from fury to confusion as she looked between me and Noodle, still on the phone with 911, and I could see her trying to decide, would she trust the disgusting mutt and the woman she'd just tried to have arrested, or would her pride and arrogance make her ignore the only warning that could save her life? She stared at me for 3 long seconds while Noodle kept pawing at her chest and whining that urgent sound I knew too well. Her face went from red to pale as her free hand moved to her chest, pressing against something she couldn't ignore anymore. The 911 operator's voice came through her phone asking if she was okay, if she needed medical assistance. She dropped onto the bench hard, her designer purse hitting the ground as both hands went to her chest now. Noodle stayed focused on her, nose pointed at her heart, tail rigid. I grabbed my emergency kit from my bag and pulled out the chewable aspirin I always carried. The second woman screamed at me to get away from her friend while the third one tried to pull me back. The second woman pushed between us, shouting that I was trying to poison her friend, that this was assault. I said loud enough for the 911 operator to hear that I had aspirin for a potential heart attack. The first woman's breathing got shallow and fast, her tennis whites soaked with sweat. The operator's voice got louder through the phone, telling the first woman to chew the aspirin if she was having any chest pain or pressure. Her friends kept yelling, but she reached out with shaking fingers and took the pills from my hand. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw real fear there, not the anger from before. The third woman backed up and accused me of training my dog to attack people somehow. I told the first woman to keep breathing slowly while help came. Noodle moved to my side but kept watching her, ready to alert again if needed. The sirens got louder and the first woman started sweating more, clutching her chest with both hands. The second woman finally stopped recording and called 911 herself, crying about her friend having a heart attack. The third woman went quiet and backed away as things got real. 2 cops showed up first, walking toward me since the original call was about fraud and a fake service dog. I pointed at the woman on the bench and told them she was having a cardiac event and needed help now. They switched focus right away and one radioed for the ambulance to hurry. The EMTs rushed in with their equipment and started checking the first woman's vitals. Her blood pressure was way too high, and the EKG showed problems with her heart rhythm. One EMT looked at me and said my dog probably saved her life by getting her to sit down and take aspirin before things got worse. The second woman started telling the officers I must have done something to cause this, that her friend was fine before I showed up. The officer pulled up the 911 recording on his tablet, where you could hear me warning about the cardiac event before any symptoms showed. He told her to step back and let the medical team work. They lifted the first first woman onto the stretcher while she struggled to breathe normally. Before they wheeled her away, she looked right at Noodle and whispered something I couldn't hear over all the noise. The EMT said they needed to get her to the hospital right away for emergency treatment. The ambulance doors slammed shut and they drove off with lights and sirens going. The second woman stood there holding her Yorkie, staring at where the ambulance had been. The third woman had already left with her dog. The officer asked me for my statement about what happened. I explained how Noodle had alerted to the cardiac event and showed him Noodle's service dog registration on my phone. He took notes and said the 911 recording backed up everything I said. The second woman tried to interrupt, saying her friend would want to press charges against me for something. The officer told her that her friend's life had just been saved, and maybe she should focus on that instead of trying to blame the person who helped. He asked if I wanted to file a complaint about them harassing me and my service dog. I said no, I just wanted to go home. The officer gave me his card in case I changed my mind. The second woman finally left, muttering about lawyers and lawsuits. I sat on the bench for a minute with Noodle pressed against my leg. My hands were shaking from the adrenaline. Noodle licked my hand and looked up at me with those mismatched eyes that had saved so many lives. I gave him a treat from my pocket and told him he was a good boy. We walked back to my apartment and I thought about how different things could have gone if that woman had ignored Noodle's warning. Her pride almost killed her. I wondered if she would remember what happened, if she would understand that the disgusting mutt she mocked had given her 40 minutes she wouldn't have had otherwise. I wonder what made these women so quick to judge someone they'd never met before. The way they immediately attacked both the narrator and Noodle without even asking questions makes me curious about what's really driving their behavior. Is it just about protecting their fancy dog park or something deeper? Noodle curled up on his bed and fell asleep right away, tired from the stress of alerting. I sat on my couch and tried to process what just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from the HOA manager asking if I was okay, which reminded me I needed to write down everything while it was fresh. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later, and when I opened it, 2 police officers stood there with notebooks out. They'd tracked down my apartment number from the HOA records and wanted my full statement about what happened at the dog park. I showed them my wrist, which had turned purple and swollen, where the third woman had twisted it trying to rip off my medical bracelet. The taller officer took photos from different angles while his partner wrote down how each woman had grabbed me and Noodle. They asked if I had any witnesses, and I remembered several residents had been watching from their balconies. The officers said they'd already talked to 3 people who saw the whole thing and confirmed the women attacked me first. One neighbor had even recorded part of it on her phone and sent it to the officers. They showed me the video, which clearly captured the second woman shoving me and trying to drag Noodle away while I begged her to stop. The shorter officer said the second woman had given them her phone at the scene, and her own recording actually proved she was lying. She'd filmed herself grabbing Noodle's vest and pushing me, then tried to delete it when they asked to see it, but they'd already watched the whole thing. Her video also caught the third woman yanking my medical bracelet hard enough to leave marks. Back at the dog park, they told me, a crowd of about 15 residents had gathered after the ambulance left with the first woman. The third woman had started telling everyone I'd caused her friend's heart attack with my fake service dog, but several people immediately corrected her. A man who'd been jogging past said he saw the women surrounding me and grabbing at my dog before anything happened with the heart attack. Another woman who'd been walking her poodle said she heard them screaming at me about Noodle being dirty and diseased. The HOA manager had shown up right after the ambulance left. Apparently someone called him about the commotion. He'd asked the officers if I was planning to sue the complex for allowing residents to assault someone with a disability. The officers told me he looked terrified when they mentioned the Americans with Disabilities Act and how the complex could be liable for not protecting me. The second woman had apparently demanded that the HOA ban me from the dog park for creating a disturbance, but one of the officers reminded her she was under investigation for assault and filing a false police report. Her face went white when he said she could face criminal charges and up to 6 months in jail. The officers asked if I needed medical attention for my wrist, and I said I'd ice it and see my doctor tomorrow if it got worse. They gave me a case number and said a detective would probably contact me within a few days about pressing charges. The second woman had left the scene shouting that her lawyer would destroy me in court for defamation and emotional distress. The officer told her not to delete anything from her phone or destroy any evidence or she'd face additional charges for tampering. She'd stomped off yelling that she knew important people and would make sure I never showed my face in the complex again. The third woman had tried one last time to convince the officers that she had video proving I'd provoked them, but when they asked to see it, she admitted she hadn't actually recorded anything. The officer warned her that lying to police was a crime, and she finally shut up and left. The HOA manager had given the officers his card and told them he'd cooperate fully with any investigation. He'd also asked them for my apartment number so he could check on me, which is why I'd gotten his text. The officers said they'd need me to come to the station tomorrow to sign my official statement and look at the evidence they'd collected. They had statements from 5 witnesses plus 2 videos showing the women attacking me and Noodle. The shorter officer said it was one of the clearest cases of assault and false reporting he'd seen in years. They also wanted to know if the first woman who had the heart attack had touched me or Noodle, because that could be additional charges if she survived. I told them she'd been the main instigator, screaming at us and calling 911 with false claims before Noodle detected her cardiac event. The officers exchanged looks and said that was important information for their report. They asked if Noodle was registered as a service dog, and I showed them his paperwork from the organization that trained him. They took photos of his certification and his vest, which still had dirty handprints from where the women had grabbed it. Before leaving, they said the HOA manager wanted to meet with me tomorrow to discuss making sure this never happened again. They'd told him I had a strong case under the ADA for discrimination and assault based on my disability. The manager had apparently turned pale and said he'd do whatever was necessary to make things right. The officers gave me their cards and said to call if I remembered anything else, or if any of the women tried to contact me. They also suggested I might want to get a lawyer just in case the women tried to sue me first. After they left, I sat back down with Noodle, who was still stressed from the morning's events. His tail was tucked and he kept pressing against my legs like he did when he sensed my anxiety levels were high. I gave him his favorite squeaky toy, but he just held it in his mouth without playing, a sure sign he was overwhelmed. A woman in workout clothes walked over from the parking lot area, holding her phone up to show me the screen. She'd been recording everything from behind her car and caught the whole thing on video, including when they shoved me and grabbed my wrist. She gave me her number and email so I could get the video for evidence later. The officers came back over to wrap up their paperwork and told me someone from the the department would call in a few days about pressing charges. One of them mentioned quietly that between the women's own 911 call recording and their false claims about me attacking them, they'd basically given the prosecutor everything needed for assault and false reporting charges. My hands were shaking bad as I finally clipped Noodle's leash back on to leave the dog park. 3 different people stopped me on the way to my car to say how sorry they were about what happened. An older man with a beagle said those same women had been harassing people at the park for months, and he'd filed complaints that went nowhere. Another woman said she'd seen them corner a teenager last week about her rescue dog being too ugly for the park. Back at my apartment, I took more pictures of my wrist, which was turning purple and swelling up pretty bad. The red marks from where the third woman twisted my medical bracelet were getting darker too. I typed up everything I could remember while it was fresh, making sure to note exact times and what each woman said and did. I saved the document in 3 different places on my computer and emailed copies to myself just to be safe. My phone rang around 7 that night, and it was my cardiologist's emergency line asking about the incident at the park. The hospital had called them because the first woman mentioned during her intake that a service dog had alerted to her heart attack before she felt any symptoms. They wanted to document Noodle's successful detection for their research program on cardiac alert dogs, since catching heart attacks that early was rare. I was scrolling through Facebook later when I saw the second woman had posted in our community group about a dangerous fake service dog attacking people at the park. Within minutes, 5 different witnesses were commenting with their own videos showing what really happened. Someone posted a screenshot of service dog laws, and another person shared security footage from the park entrance, showing the women surrounding me. The post got taken down within an hour, but not before screenshots spread everywhere. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize saying it was the first woman's daughter wanting to know what happened. I kept my response short and factual about how Noodle detected her mom's heart attack, and I gave her CPR despite being assaulted. She texted back that her mom was stable in the ICU and admitted she'd been awful to me before almost dying. The next morning, my supervisor called after seeing all the Facebook drama asking if I was okay to work with my injured wrist. I explained what happened, and she immediately said to take whatever time I needed for doctor visits or legal stuff. She mentioned the company had dealt with ADA violations before and took them really seriously if I needed their legal team's help. That afternoon, the HOA sent out an email blast to all residents about respecting service animals and federal disability laws. They didn't mention the incident directly, but included new fines for harassing anyone with a service dog starting at $500 for the first offense. My neighbors started texting me saying it was about time since those women had been causing problems for years. 3 days went by before a detective called asking to meet about pressing charges. She said between all the witness videos, the 911 recording, and the women's own contradicting statements, the prosecutor was confident about the case. The second woman had already hired a lawyer who was trying to work out a plea deal to avoid jail time. The third woman was cooperating completely and admitted everything they did was wrong, saying she got caught up in the moment and felt terrible about grabbing me. The detective said cases this clear-cut with this much evidence rarely went to trial since defendants usually took deals. These women recorded themselves attacking someone and then tried to delete the evidence. That's quite the decision-making process there. Makes me wonder what they thought would happen when they handed their phones to the police. Did they forget what they'd just filmed themselves doing? She asked if I'd be willing to do a victim impact statement if needed, and said the prosecutor would be in touch within the week. My wrist was still sore, but the swelling had gone down enough that I could type again without too much pain. Noodle had finally relaxed enough to play with his toys again, though he stayed extra close to me for days after the incident. The community Facebook group exploded with more people sharing their own stories about those 3 women harassing them over everything from their cars not being expensive enough to their kids being too loud at the pool. Someone started a petition to have them removed from the HOA board, since 2 of them apparently held positions despite multiple complaints. The property management company announced they were reviewing all the complaints and security footage from common areas going back 6 months. More witnesses kept coming forward with videos and stories about similar incidents that had been ignored or dismissed before. 2 days later, I sat in a small office downtown while a disability rights lawyer reviewed all the videos on her laptop. She kept pausing to take notes and shaking her head at what she saw. The office smelled like old coffee and paper, and Noodle stayed perfectly still beside my chair while she worked. She told me I had clear grounds for both criminal and civil action, especially with all the video evidence showing the assault and false reports. We spent an hour going through my options, and she said we should start with criminal charges to establish an official record of what happened. She wasn't charging me anything for her time, which was a huge relief since my savings were already tight. That afternoon, my phone rang, and it was the first woman's daughter again, her voice sounding tired and stressed. She explained her mom wanted to apologize directly, but their lawyer had told them not to contact me at all. Her mom was dealing with the reality of almost dying, and knew Noodle had saved her life when nobody else could have detected the heart attack that early. I thanked her for calling, but said I needed to maintain boundaries while everything was still being sorted out legally. My wrist had been hurting worse each day since the incident, throbbing whenever I moved it wrong. The doctor took x-rays and found ligament damage from when the third woman had twisted it trying to rip off my medical bracelet. He documented everything as assault-related injury in my medical records and gave me a referral for physical therapy twice a week. The bills started coming in fast, over $300 just for the initial visit and x-rays, which my lawyer said would help our civil case. A thick envelope arrived from the second woman's lawyer with a settlement offer that was basically insulting, just $500 to drop all charges. My lawyer actually laughed when she read it and immediately wrote back demanding full medical costs, legal fees, and damages for the assault and emotional distress. She said they were trying to make this go away cheap, but we weren't going to let them get off that easy. Someone had posted the videos online, and suddenly local news stations were calling my phone non-stop wanting interviews. A reporter even showed up at my apartment building, but I declined to talk to any of them, preferring to handle things through proper legal channels. My inbox filled with messages from other service dog handlers sharing their own stories of discrimination and offering support. The HOA sent an official letter asking me to attend their next board meeting as a consultant to help update their service animal policies. They offered to pay me $200 for my time, which I accepted since I hoped it might prevent other handlers from going through what I did. The meeting was in the community center, and about 30 residents showed up, way more than usual according to the secretary. When they opened the floor for comments, person after person stood up to share stories about the 3 women harassing harassing them over the years. One man said they'd tried to get his daughter's autism service dog banned from the pool area. Another woman said they'd screamed at her elderly mother for walking too slowly on the sidewalk. The pattern became so clear that the board members looked sick as they realized they'd been enabling bullies who terrorized the whole complex. They voted unanimously to implement new anti-harassment policies with real penalties, including fines and potential eviction for repeated violations. The prosecutor's office finally filed official charges against the second woman for assault and filing a false police report. The third woman got offered something called a deferred prosecution agreement, where she'd have to do 50 hours of community service and take classes about disability rights. She actually seemed sorry when I saw her at the courthouse, keeping her eyes down and nodding when the judge explained the terms. 2 weeks had passed since the incident when I finally worked up the nerve to go back to the dog park early one morning. My hands were shaking as I opened the gate, but instead of confrontation, several regular visitors came over to check on me. One older woman said she'd been reading about invisible disabilities since seeing what happened, and apologized for never speaking up when she'd witnessed similar harassment before. People kept coming up to pet Noodle and tell me how brave he was for alerting on the first woman's heart attack. I was putting groceries in my car at the store when the second woman suddenly appeared behind me in the parking lot. She started hissing that I needed to drop the charges immediately or I'd regret it, moving closer until she was right in my face. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 while she kept threatening me, trying to grab the phone from my hand. The police arrived within minutes and arrested her right there for witness intimidation, putting her in handcuffs while other shoppers watched. Her bail conditions now included a restraining order requiring her to stay at least 500 feet away from me and Noodle at all times. 2 months after the trial ended, the police officer who arrested the second woman called me about speaking at their training workshop. He explained that my case had become required reading for their disability rights unit. I drove to the police station on a Tuesday morning with Noodle wearing his vest. The training room held 40 officers taking notes while I showed them videos from that day at the park. I demonstrated Noodle's alert behaviors and explained how service dogs work differently than pets. The officers asked questions about proper responses to discrimination calls. I spent 3 hours going through scenarios they might face. The disability rights lawyer who handled our case contacted me the following week with news about other handlers winning their cases. She showed me court documents where judges cited our case as precedent for service dog rights, and 3 different handlers had used our case to fight discrimination at stores and restaurants. The lawyer kept a file of every case that referenced ours. She said we'd helped more people than we realized. 6 months passed and my wrist still hurt on cold mornings from when the third woman twisted it. I found myself checking over my shoulder in crowded places. Noodle started walking closer to me than before, pressing against my leg in stores. My therapist said trauma takes time to heal. I wore long sleeves to hide the scar from where the medical bracelet cut into my skin. The nightmares about that day came less often but still woke me up sometimes. The HOA president called me one afternoon asking if I'd join their accessibility committee. They were rewriting their policies after our case made the news. I attended my first meeting the next Thursday at the community center. We reviewed every rule about service animals in public spaces. I suggested changes based on federal law requirements. The committee voted to add disability training for all HOA board members. I volunteered to create the training materials using my experience. During my morning walks, I started seeing the first woman from that day at the park. She had a golden retriever puppy wearing a cardiac alert vest in training. She'd walk on the opposite side of the park when she saw us coming. One morning, she nodded at me from across the grass. Her dog was learning to detect heart problems like Noodle does. I heard from neighbors that her heart attack that day had damaged her heart permanently. She needed a service dog now to warn her about irregular heartbeats. The community Facebook group changed completely after the second woman got banned for harassment. People started sharing resources about invisible disabilities and service dog laws. Someone posted about their child's autism service dog and got supportive comments. Another person asked for help finding disability resources for their elderly parent. The toxic post disappeared and helpful information took their place. Residents began standing up when they saw discrimination happening. My boss called me into her office 3 months after everything settled down. She'd watched the news coverage and read about how I handled the situation. She offered me a promotion to team lead with a raise. She said my advocacy skills and ability to stay calm under pressure showed leadership. I accepted the position and started training new employees the next month. My morning routine with Noodle never changed even after everything that happened. We still walked through the park at 7 every morning with his vest clearly visible. Other dog owners smiled and waved instead of staring or whispering. Kids asked polite questions about what Noodle does to help me. Their parents taught them not to pet working dogs. The park felt safer than before even though the memories stayed with me. Noodle saved that woman's life even after she called him disgusting and dirty. He did his job without caring who needed help or what they'd said about him. That's what real service dogs do every single day. Thanks for hanging in there with me through all of this. Kinda makes you look at things a little differently, huh? I'll see you around. Like the video. It helps more than you think.